talking about how to prepare yourself and your child for homeschooling for the long term, for the long haul. Brand new homeschoolers, what I've noticed when they first come to homeschooling is they really want to know first, am I capable of doing this? So they kind of go through a period of assessment, personal assessment. Am I strong enough? Am I smart enough? Am I well equipped enough? Do I have the resources enough in order to actually start homeschooling my child? And then eventually, usually they say, okay, yes, I think I am, so I'm going to take this journey. And then the question becomes, how do I go about doing this? So once you've kind of made that commitment to doing it, you've got to figure out, how do I approach this? And one of the biggest concerns that parents have is they want to make sure that they are doing it in a way that is going to lead to long-term success with their children. Maybe a short-term goal is make it to the end of the year, but a long-term goal is parents want to know, they're hit with these fears of, what if I mess this up? Or what if, and I took some notes right here, what if I am in danger of failing this journey or failing my child? And I didn't know it. What if I did this big risky thing, decided to educate my own child at home, and then I messed up and my child, that was the sensitive period for this thing, and I missed it, and then there are these big consequences later on. And this is real scary for homeschoolers. And I went through this particular phase of homeschooling that am I messing up? Am I failing? What if I fail? What are the huge consequences that are going to happen if I don't do this right? What if I don't get this right? Because you can't go back in your children's lives. You cannot go back and redo those early years a different way, like we can with a lot of other things. If you are a business owner, say you're created some kind of cool techie gadget, right? You go through a process of experimenting with it, and maybe you have some testers test it out, see how well it does. They give you reviews and feedback, and then you tweak and you make the product better, right? And then you start marketing it to people and then persuading them that this is going to be a great product and it's going to change their lives for the long haul. It's solid and it's well developed, and it's going to be high quality or whatever, right? You can't do that in education. You've got one child at a time, and you have several children, but each child is one separate whole experience. And homeschoolers in general, and I have this sense because I've gone to many, many park days full of homeschoolers where we chat about this kind of stuff. We all have this period now and then where we start thinking, but what if? What if I didn't get this right? What if I don't do this right this time? Because I can't go back. You know that you can't refine this experience for your child and test it out again and make it better and then have a finished product. You can't do that in education. So one of the keys to making sure that you are ensuring success in your child is I feel like every homeschooler needs to get really centered on a core philosophy of education. Now, this might be unschooling for you. Okay, that's a very free form for philosophy. Might be Charlotte Mason, might be for me, Montessori, might be Waldorf, might just be a constructivist philosophy or progressive philosophy. It might have to do with your religion. That might be part of your philosophy of education for your child and your reason for doing things the way that you're going to do them. And if you can get centered on that, you start to be able to hash out what the word success means to you, or what kind of outcomes you are hoping for in your education. And I think that this process is so important. And so this live is about encouraging you, not just me telling you to do this, or telling you what success looks like, but actually encouraging you to go through this mental process yourself, and maybe even spend some time taking some notes yourself about what, not why you want to homeschool, but what you imagine the outcome of homeschooling to be. Okay? So when I started going through this process myself, and I do before I give these little talks, just so that I can prepare my mind and really engage in the activity I'm asking you to do yourself is I started immediately thinking, kind of categorizing these things. When I think about success for my children, I tend to think of it in these different categories, like success with academics. Okay, what does academic success look like long-term for children? Or social, emotional success. What does that look like in my perspective, coming from my core philosophy of education, which for me is definitely Montessori, but also is influenced by the different educational methods that are out there. And so, if we can even do this together on Instagram. I know some of you are watching live. If you want to comment live, that's great. Or answer in the comments. I'll repost this in my little Instagram feed so that you can always comment with your answers. We can kind of chat that way. But let's start with academic. So just start by thinking about, and if you're watching the recording of this, I love you too. You can even pause this right here and go do some journaling or just some brainstorming right now, okay? So academics, what do we want our children to be like or be sufficient or successful in long-term academically? So my mind immediately went to specific skills. I wonder if that's where your mind is going to. Immediately I was like, math. I have to be teaching the math. I know somebody in here is in the lower elementary course, and we're doing math tomorrow. So like my brain is like math right now. But I started thinking, what is it about math that I feel like is so important for my children, that I want for them long term? And my answer is really, I want them to have basic math skills so that they can be successful in their home management life. I want them to be able to pay their bills. I want them to be able to make good financial decisions later on. I want them to be able to tell a good deal from a bad deal. And that's like part math skill, but it's also part internet marketing savviness with math, right? So I want them to have practical skills with math. I want them to be able to add and subtract, multiply and divide mentally so that they don't have to count on their fingers like I do. I have a math learning disability and I often rely on my fingers, and I want my children, hopefully, to have that mental math really, really integrated so that they don't have to feel like they're stumbling when they pay a tip, okay? So that is at base a specific skill that I want my children to have an outcome by the time they grow up. Now, we know that in public education, children have many more skills than that. In math, by the time they graduate, most of them have many more than just basic math skills that they would use in order to write a check or balance their bank account, especially with all the technology that we have to help people do that. And so what a bigger, longer term outcome from teaching my children math is it also teaches them critical thinking skills. It strengthens their brain. It helps them to see the world in a different way. It helps them to identify patterns that are in the universe. And this is going to hopefully lead them to deeper thoughts and understandings about their own world, whether they actually have to do with math or not. And so the key here is really getting specific with the kinds of things that you feel like, or the kinds of actual skills you feel like you want your children to have long term. And then going past that, thinking, well, what does this work now? What does this specific skill lead them to in the future? And this process is what is going to solidify things for you to help you overcome that danger of failing. What if I mess this up? Feeling that so many of us have. So I wrote down some more things in specific skills, and I would love to hear, kind of looking through the comments, I would love to hear some of yours too, if you have them to share with me. I want my children to be able to read by the time I am done homeschooling them. And I know that this may seem like a low bar, but by read, I mean be able to take in information and analyze it and interpret it and personalize it and learn from it. And in order to do all those things, to get to the point where we can be able to do all of those things when we're reading a short article online or whether we're reading a long book, it is not something that you just learn how to do and then it's done, right? It's something that the skills will build and build and build and build. We engage with our children and teach them how to read starting when they're very young with the sounds in Montessori. We want them to hear all of the sounds and words. We do lots of oral language activities. We teach them vocabulary when they're very, very young. And then when they're a little bit older, we start giving them the keys to learning how to write their own thoughts using the movable alphabet in Montessori. And then we start teaching them how to write for purpose. And this might be as simple as a grocery list. It might be as complex as an original idea or story that they came up with or a dream that they had. And then from there, we want to just nudge them into more curious, open-ended forums that engage with reading and writing in a variety of subject areas. And so the short term is, or sort of long term, is by the end of this homeschooling adventure, and I have a long time to make this happen, I want my children to feel proficient with reading, okay? Be able to read and interpret. And reading and writing go together. So when I say one, obviously it's both of them. But the long stretching out goal of that particular focus is much deeper. I want them to be adults who are able to feel confident in their ability to research information for themselves that is meaningful. Before they take a medication just because it was recommended, I want them to be able to go and read some peer-reviewed research about it, interpret it, and decide whether it's the right thing for them, okay? And not just take somebody else's word, or to see some kind of advertising, see a product advertised for them, and then to go and do the actual research and determine, is this thing real? What techniques is this marketer trying to use in order to persuade me to buy this product? And should I buy into it based on the knowledge that I have and the research that I have done? Is that aligned with my personal being? Okay, so to get children to that point, it's a slow process, much slower than we think. And as homeschoolers, I think we often feel like we have to prepare children for these very, very short-term goals, academically especially. We may have a list of my child needs to have this, be able to do fractions by this age, or be able to add with exchanging by this age, or my child is behind if I haven't taught them how to, if they can't write a paragraph fully yet, by second grade or whatever it is. We get trapped by these very short-term goals as homeschoolers, and it's very, very important that we get really clear with these goals in understanding how they're going to lead to these long-term outcomes, because that is really the very important part of this whole process. So I'll read to you a few more of these that I came up with within these categories. So academically, here's where my mind went. I want them to be able to eventually write an essay, to eventually be able to take notes, to eventually research topics of their own interest. For social, I want them to be able to make friends. That doesn't mean that I have to force them into friendships right now where I need to stress out when, if I feel like they aren't getting enough social, or if they do or do not have, a core and solid social group. Okay, those are different kinds of goals. But eventually, I want them to be able to sustain healthy relationships with other people, to know what it is to be a friend to somebody, and to know when somebody is really your friend versus somebody who is not actually your friend at all, who is working against you and your own needs. And that takes a long time. Okay, it's not solved by a single experience. It's not solved by you engaging in certain social activities, okay? If your child is in sports, that's great. If your child is not in sports, that doesn't mean that they're not going to get that life lesson another way, okay? They will. And you just have to trust that eventually during this long period of time, they will get there, and that you are capable of helping them get there. But every child's journey is going to look different. You can't just assume that a child is going to suddenly like get a skill and then be able to do a certain thing in a short period of time. Some children can, some children skip big steps, and some children need these itty bitty little steps and these periods of setbacks in order to get there. And as homeschoolers, we see those setbacks much more clearly than you do in the classroom. And I can say that being a homeschooler myself, having been through this cycle of years, that sometimes your children are just learning at this incredible fast pace and you're just feeling like, wow, I'm such a great teacher because I'm doing all these awesome things. My children are just leaping and bounding forward. And then there are also periods where it feels like your children aren't learning anything. And these periods could be as short as a week or as long as 6 months even, where your children seem to be in a regressive state, where they are not taking in, as much new knowledge or, progressing in their skills. And you just think it's been 6 months and we're still she's still exactly where she was 6 months ago. What am I doing wrong? Might not be about you. It might just be that this is this natural ebb and flow of learning and that your children are progressing in certain ways and then holding that knowledge before they can progress again further. And in traditional education, we don't expect that to be the way children learn and grow. We have structured our school system so that every single week, every single month, every single year, children take this linear little step forward. And that is not how child development works. And that's why when at home, you are seeing the whole child and you are engaging in a holistic way. If you try to structure their education in that linear way, you are not going to be as happy because you're going to see your children stop and start and go forward super quick and regress, and it's going to not be in that linear format, and you'll be confused and you'll start thinking, I'm failing at that point. And I just promise you, you're not failing. There are some things that work really well in a linear way, but we have to have the flexibility to understand that our children aren't necessarily going to follow that path that is prescribed by a curriculum book. Most of us as homeschoolers use a variety of different curriculums. I offer one myself, but it is certainly not the only one I use myself. I pull in lots of resources from a variety of different homeschooling curriculum authors. There is one thing I look for in particular when I look for homeschool curriculum, though, that I want you to be aware of, and that is, not coming from a judgmental space, but from a place of experience. When I search for curriculum, I'm not looking for curriculum that is created by a big mega organization or even a teacher who has never had the experience of homeschooling. I generally personally choose curriculum that was created by homeschoolers themselves. And part of this is because homeschoolers, there are a lot of us out there who are working part-time while homeschooling in order to afford to homeschool ourselves, to be able to nurture our family financially, as well as be able to explore our own interests, okay? Homeschoolers often will dabble in creating their own curriculum. And so I feel like this is a good way as a homeschooler to give back. So if I'm choosing a math curriculum, I'm going to look at all my options. I'm going to say, okay, this one was created by some schmo who was like, I don't know, a college professor or whatever. Okay, it might be a really good curriculum. But this one was created by a mama at home who worked with her own child, who did the research, and I will just generally tend to want to support that person. So that's me personally. And of course, you can make your own decision about who you want to support and what kind of curriculum you go with. But I strongly, strongly recommend learning from other homeschoolers on this journey and not just taking in the advice of somebody who is an educator, but someone who is kind of like putting themselves in the perspective of what would it be like to be a homeschooler and what would I need, and then here's the curriculum for it. I feel like if you're coming at homeschooling from that angle, not from like a personal angle, you're much more likely to give somebody a curriculum that is not flexible enough for what homeschoolers actually need. Okay, and so that is my personal thing. So speaking of the word personal, and this will be kind of my last bit of wisdom for you this morning, I want my children long-term to be people who can follow their dreams. I know this sounds a little ethereal and non-prescriptive and maybe not something that you can really quantify, but think about yourself. Think about the dreams that you had as a children and the dreams that you have right now. What are your dreams? What is it about you that is able to be a person who follows their dreams in one way or another? And then focus on teaching those skills to your children along the way and being that role model for them. I want my child to be a person who balances work and play. And as a Montessorian, for me, work and play are just like this. But still, there are many aspects of my life that I engage in with a more of a work mindset versus a more of a playful mindset. And I want my child to understand both the difference in different ways to engage with the world, but also understand that in order to have a happy life or a fulfilling life, even better, you need to be able to have that introspection to understand how you're engaging and to make sure that you're engaging in both ways and not just leaning into one or the other all the time. And I feel like it's okay to lean in one way or the other during different periods of life, but also it's important to be aware when you're leaning and to know that if you lean one way for too long, you have to lean the other way for a little while, okay? I want my child to have an outcome where they value their uniqueness of self. I want them to be able to be in a crowd and to know that they are their own person and that they can make their own choices about things. And this goes further than peer pressure, okay? This is great because hello, Instagram, I am on you, and yet this is such a big thing for you and your people, that we want to not glorify other people so much and idolize them so much that we feel insufficient ourselves. I want my child to know that they are a unique person and that no matter how many times somebody likes their post, it has nothing to do with their value as a person. And this is a psychological thing that is really difficult on social media, but I believe that we can overcome it if we are conscious and mindful about the ways we are interacting. I want my child to value their health. I don't want them to sacrifice their health for work or play. I want them to understand that in order to be their most effective, most interesting, most unique, most wonderful, loving self, they have to prioritize their health. And this is not in a prescriptive way about only eat this food or exercise this certain times a week. It's about knowing that there are many parts of a person that needs to be nurtured in order to be healthy. And I want them to understand that by the time I release them into the world. And the last one here is I want them to be able to commit to something, to have perseverance and dedication in whatever it is that they're choosing to be dedicated to, okay? Whether, and as a young child, maybe it's a dedication to a sport or a dedication to a game that they like to play or even an online game they like to play, but I want them to feel, and video games actually do this really well for older children. I am pro video game personally with my older children. I have a 10 and a 13-year-old now, and they do a lot of gaming. And I feel like it really does teach them this kind of perseverance to the end and that feeling of I'm not going to give up. I'm just going to keep fighting this next big boss until I get to the next big boss. And it's exciting to me to see their thrill of accomplishment when they say, yeah, I got to the end of that thing and I did it and I accomplished it. And that is something that video games do teach children, even though as Montessorians we have reservations about how they are interacting with the child's brain, and I acknowledge all that, but there is a lot of good that comes out of them too, especially for older children. I don't necessarily believe that for the little ones. I feel like perseverance at that age, when you're talking about your preschooler or even young lower elementary child, I still feel like the big perseverance happens in that hands-on work. But once they're older, they're able to take what they've learned with that dedication and that accomplishment, and they're able to apply it to more abstract stuff, okay? So that is my perspective on video games and perseverance. And lastly, just to send you off with this notion that nobody gets to where you hope to be quickly, okay? If you evaluate how you are, if you make this big list of things that you hope for your child someday, and I could go on and on and on with these. I could write pages, and I just wrote just these little notes, okay? But if you look at this list of yours, you might also look, am I there? Do I follow my dreams? Do I persevere through hard things? Do I value my own self-uniqueness? And when I'm getting trapped in thinking more about how many people like my posts or whatever, what do I do about it to get myself back on the right track, to remember that I am whole and unique and wonderful? Because you are this role model for your child, for their lifelong learning journey. And so that one of the best things that we can do after we've thought through what are these outcomes that we want eventually long term is to internalize that. Do some self-care and really think about, how am I representing these things to my children? Am I using my basic math skills in front of my children? Am I using my critical thinking skills in front of my children? Am I talking out loud when I research something and try to decide if it's the right thing for me and include them in that journey of mine? Because children learn so much more from us than we think that they do. And I can tell you, when you get older, you start saying things that your mama said, and that's how you know, like, oh wow, she really, really got into my brain. And that is a good thing. Get into your child's brain in that loving way. You want them to call back elements of you that were things, representations of things that they want for themselves, all right? And I know we all say things to our children that we don't mean, and just know that mostly children are not going to remember those things. They're going to remember that big role modeling that you did from them to better yourself, to take care of yourself, to become a better person. And Maria Montessori believed in this 100%. You can just pick up almost any book of hers, The Observer of Mind, Secret of Childhood, Education of Peace, what have you, and find these little threads of thought where she was saying, but the adult has to be that role model for the child, that person, or be more pure, or reach for the most pure version of themselves, the most golden versions of themselves. All right, so tack on that word eventually. Anytime you have that in your brain of, my child isn't able to, put a but eventually at the end of it, okay? Anytime you start trapping yourself in that, feeling like your child isn't doing the thing that you were hoping that they would do by this point. My child isn't reading, but eventually he will, okay? My child isn't able to do a multiplication or hasn't memorized their multiplication facts, but eventually they will, okay? And that will help to give you the confidence to know that later on, it's all going to work out, okay? And we all have deficiencies in ourselves. We're not perfect, so your child is not going to grow up whole and able to engage in all these ways that you were hoping. It's their journey to take, and they will have work to do as an adult in this personal category, especially just like you do. And that's okay. You're raising a human being, not a prescriptive robot that just learns in this linear fashion. And that is wonderful. All right. Have a great day.